Hello folks, welcome back to another free tutorial of the Gardini School. This is the first video of a series called Symphonic Approaches, where I will show you how I orchestrated some pieces. This series is a sneak peek of my upcoming advanced orchestration course that will be released exclusively at the Gardini School. And for the first episode, I thought it would be insightful to create a video that would demystify some of the most misunderstood orchestration concepts today. For that, I separated the video into three main topics. Let's go to the first one. Synths that complement the orchestra. We are going to see that on many occasions, what has been originally created for a synth can be reproduced with acoustic instruments of an orchestra. You just ought to have a deep knowledge of the capacities of each instrument. Second, woodwind usage in big orchestrations. The woodwind instruments have been incredibly underestimated in modern music. For many composers, this section has been used only as solo or fast runs. But what about if you don't want neither a solo or a fast run? Should they be put aside, or can they contribute something important to the texture? We are going to see it in a minute. 3. Orchestration of a real symphonic orchestra may not be as simple as you think. Most composers today have the preconception that if they are not clearly hearing an instrument, it's because it's not playing. A warning. A common sense in music is based on the phrase, trust your ears. It is a good advice. However, if you are not overly familiar with reading full scores, you should not trust your ears when the subject is orchestration. It's very common in orchestral textures to have instruments playing at a substantial volume, but they can't be heard. In fact, they are there only to be felt. Now, the music that I chose to exemplify these three main topics is the iconic main theme from the movie Inception. It's called Time, composed by Hans Zimmer. The composer used a huge array of instruments, including an expanded brass ensemble, lots of synths, percussion, strings, samples, and probably even overdubs. I thought it would be very instructional to challenge myself by reorchestrating the main theme with a standard symphonic orchestra. The original music is very intense, heavy, and full of doubles. And my chore was to achieve a similar effect within the boundaries of a standard symphonic orchestra. Keep in mind that the intention was not to work on a replica of this track. The goal was to reorchestrate the cue within the acoustic orchestra's limits and as close as possible to the composer's original idea. So, for the instrumentation, I have the following. Let's go to the score. Okay, starting with the woodwinds, I have 3 flutes, 2 oboes, 1 English horn, 2 clarinets, 2 B-flat clarinets, 1 bass clarinet, 2 bassoons, and 1 contrabassoon. So it's woodwinds A3. Now, it comes the brass, which is a little bit expanded if you compare it with the standard of a symphonic orchestra, which has only 6 horns, but now I have 8, which is kind of pretty realistic for a big orchestra. 4 trumpets, 2 tenor bones, 2 bass bones, and 1 tuba. Now the percussion, 1 timpani, 1 vibraphone, and here I have put extended bass because this is a vibraphone with extended bass. I will explain it in a minute. And motor on with vib of vibrato. Very soft mallet, no audible attacks. We are going to analyze all these indications with scrutiny when I reach the vibraphone in the DAW. Tom-toms, tam-tams, which actually it has been used, so we can simply delete it. Gran Cassa, taiko or pseudo. It's a choice because some orchestras don't have taikos. It's becoming more and more common, but some orchestras don't have it. And pseudos are more common, so they both have a similar effect and you can choose either for them. And the only two instruments that are not standard of a symphonic orchestra is an electric guitar that actually is in the original composed by Hans Zimmer. One of the motifs have been done for an electric guitar, and there's no substitute in the orchestra that can play this part. And one electric piano. This is actually one of the tricks of the orchestration. We are going to see it in a minute too. Harp, celeste, which is probably an instrument that almost no one would ever think is playing in my reorchestration. Piano, which has a very beautiful solo part for the piano. And now comes the string section, which is composed by 16 first violins, 14 second violins, 12 violas, 10 cellos, and 8 basses. The only thing that I would call your attention here is apply scordatura to the 4th string, half tone down. Scordatura is an interesting option that you can use, but I would urge you to use it with a lot of parsimony. The instrument players will tune their strings in a different way other than fifths. So it's usually something that is not very common to be asked for, and instrument players don't like to play on scordatura at all, unless you are asking them to tune up or down accordingly in fifths, as the strings are usually done mainly for violas, violins, and cellos. Basses are in fourths. Alright, so I asked scordatura just to conform with the key of the piece. I needed a low B, which is inexistent in the viola, but with the scordatura, 4th string, half tone down, they can reach this low B. Alright, let's go back to the DAW. I won't play the entire piece for you because it will take more than 4 minutes, but if you haven't watched the original video with my reorchestration, I urge you to stop this one now and click the first link down below in the description. I will be here waiting for you to come back. Okay, the beginning of the music starts with a piano solo making a couple of notes in each bar plus a low synth pulsation. Let's briefly hear the original just to refresh our minds. Okay, it's enough, just 4 measures. Recreating this pulsation with acoustic instruments may not be a simple task. There's no instrument in the orchestra that can play this pulsation like the original, so it may require more than a single or few instruments. Then I thought that the best idea would be to combine different instruments to recreate this effect. But the question is, which ones? My starting point was to select the soft sounds of the orchestra. And for soft sounds, I mean the instruments that can produce a smooth attack and timbre. I usually designate them as weak timbres. Let's examine each orchestral instrument and analyze its potential to add something to the effect we are seeking. So starting with the flute, I would think of its bottom register. But actually, the flute is too luminous and bright, even in the lower register, so it's an instrument that I would dismiss first. The oboe. The timbre of the oboe is very nasal, and I feel it's not suitable for the beginning of this music. Opposed to the flute, which is a weak timbre compared to the oboe, which is a strong timbre, out of the two ones, the oboe is less suitable. But I didn't choose either of them. Now, the clarinets. The clarinet has a peculiar sound in the lowest octave, which is called Chalumeau register. It's full of color and it can add a lot of smooth sounds. So clarinet is one of the choices that probably I would choose. I decided not to, so there's nothing here. But anyway, it's one of the instruments that would probably be suitable for this occasion. Bass clarinet, the same thing. Bassoons share the same characteristics of the oboes and an English horn, which is very nasal, so not very good for the beginning. The brass, I don't even have to say anything. The brass section is out of question now. It's the orchestra's most powerful ensemble, and it should be reserved for a later entrance when the music becomes powerful. So, skipping the brass, we come to percussion. The timpani, when played softly, has a very smooth timbre, but by being a drum, it's not one of the right choices for the effect we are seeking. Actually, drums are not welcome in the beginning. Now we come to the vibraphone, which is our first interesting instrument to add. The vibraphone is an interesting addition because on piano and pianissimos, it has a smooth timbre. Depending on the orchestration, it may easily be covered by other instruments, and this is a characteristic that we are looking for. The problem is on its attack. I didn't want to hear the attacks, but at the same time I wanted to have some sustains on it. The only solution for this case is to use soft mullets, which I specified in the score here. Another unique characteristic of the vibraphone is its sustained pedal and the vibrato. You may use it with motor off, which means no vibrato at all, or with motor on, that will provide a very similar effect of a pulsation if the motor is set to a low speed. So, I didn't specify the speed, but motor on with vib. Now, going to the DAW. Let's hear how it sounds. All right, this has been my vibraphone with motor on, but now let's go to the instrument and take away the vibrato. So no tremolo at all. And without the motor on, it would sound like this. And now, going back with the motor on, it sounds like this. Okay, but the vibraphones don't go down to this bottom A0 over here, which is where the pulsation should be. Since I am using a modeled vibraphone, the range can be extended to as low or as high as I want. Let's say here, vibraphone. But remember that the goal is to achieve a similar effect by using acoustic instruments. Therefore, I am limited by the real range of a vibraphone. The lowest note of a vibraphone is this F2. But as you can see, I have written some E's, D's over here, E, D, and even C. And this is the instrument that I had in mind. They are not as common as the normal vibraphone, but you can find them in professional settings. Going down the score, the next instrument would be the marimba, which is not included in this score. Marimba is one of the instruments that I considered first, because it's another good option for our palette. It can produce a very quiet and smooth sound, especially on its lower register that goes lower than the vibraphone. But I decided not to use it because it lacks sustain. Alright, now let's stick with the DAW. The next instruments would be glockenspiel. I don't even have to say anything about it. There are some tubular bells, chimes, no usage at all, and drums, gongs, no usage at all. Low toms, nothing that we can use for the beginning of this piece. But now we reach a point where there's harp and celeste. The harp and celeste share the same characteristics that I need, especially on their bottom octaves. Both of them have similarities with the piano sound, making them very useful to provide more resonance. Let's hear the harp first. Now, the celeste has the same problem as the vibraphone. Neither of them can go down to the bottom register. However, they can complement each other in the upper octave. You can either think of the celeste complementing the vibraphone or the vibraphone complementing the celeste. I particularly prefer to consider that the celeste is complementing the vibraphone because out of the two, the celeste has a weaker sound. So here is the celeste. One of the key secrets of the beginning of this orchestration. Okay, now let's hear celeste with vibraphone. We are now starting to get some pulsation. It's brighter than the original, but the meaning is similar. Now we come to the keyboards. And my piano is almost the same as the original except for some half notes that I added to help the pulsation. Here is the piano. As you can see, this is not a solo piano in the foreground. It's a piano that I placed back in the orchestra with the other percussion instruments. Alright, the electric piano plays an important role in this texture. It helps give more resonance to the bottom octave, and its muffled sound helps to darken the piano. Let's hear it. Having said that, we are going to our last instrument, that is the double bass. The arco double bass would probably be the first instrument an orchestrator would think to add. It's not a bad idea at all, but when we think of the double bass timbre, we realize that is not the right choice. We can hear the frequencies in its bottom register, which may divert us from the original idea. So instead I use double basses in pizzicato, but only a couple of them. I didn't want to have the entire ensemble playing pizzicato because it would be too boomy. So here is 2 double basses in unison playing pizzicato. So by adding all instruments now, the sound is like this. Alright, this has been the first part of episode 1 of Symphonic Approaches. If you have any other different idea of how to orchestrate the beginning of this music, I would love to know. Just let me know by commenting on this video and I will reply to you as soon as I have some time. And now, if you want to continue to learn, proceed to the next video of this playlist. There's so much good stuff coming. See you soon. Bye.